Hey everybody. Hey, this is Trey. This is Gracyn here, and this is gonna be our project where we just all learn together about the Asians and whitewashing and the media over the past hundred or so years.
So in order to start this off, we want you guys to understand what whitewashing is. And it's actually a casting practice where white actors are used in non-white roles. The main ideas from this presentation is just that Hollywood has created a normacy where white actors are transformed with makeup in order to play non-white roles. And so media influences not only the perception, beliefs, and attitudes of other people about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, but it actually changes how AAPI for short define themselves. And so some of the things that we hope you'll get from this presentation is just one, the understanding that whitewashing is an issue that has caused cultural misrepresentation. It's also, we want you to understand the history of whitewashing and when it began and how it began. And then finally, we want you to realize the solution begins with our own perceptions and also our education of just these rarely spoken entertainment racial prejudices.
Okay, why does whitewashing matter? Whitewashing not only causes a lot of underrepresentation in the entertainment industry, this underrepresentation could end up causing like great harm among the young generations, like my kids, Gracyn's kids, maybe all your kids, as they will end up developing their own warped conception of the racial equality. It's sad that I didn't even know when I tried to look it up was this, where it was for a 5-year span from 2007 to 2012, it ended up showing that 75.8% of all the roles in the top 500 gross films were filmed with only white actors. So that's meaning movies like Avatar or some of the older MCU movies. So it's just some of the superhero movies that we love, all were done with white actors.
So we also want to talk about why it's a problem, and kind of like Trey was saying, the biggest thing is popular media has the ability to shape the way that people think and view certain topics. It's just basically saying like the things that we watch and the things that we're exposed to do have a way of influencing the way we think. And so with this understanding in mind, Hollywood has just largely misrepresented Asians in the film industry and oftentimes created a false stereotype as a result.
So let's talk about the history of whitewashing, even though everyone may not want to listen to history. I certainly didn't want to listen to history back in high school, but it would teach you some things like this, for example. The first actual instance of whitewashing occurred all the way back in 1916 with the movie Intolerance. And this is one of those occurrences where it didn't seem like it was just Asian culture, it was multiple cultures that were ended up being affected by whitewashing. But the first actual instance of it, the more instances of it occurred with the Asian culture. But for the very first incident, it was during that film where an English actor by the name of Alfred Pagan had played Prince Belshazzar of Babylon, while a German actor, George Siegmann, ended up playing the Persian king Cyrus the Great.
So now we're just going to look through some real-world examples of whitewashing just to give you guys an idea of specific movies and shows that you can look to and find these things. And so the first one is with Warner Orland, and he was a white man who was casted to play a Chinese detective, Charlie Chan, in a series of movies. And so while some felt that generally it was a win for a Chinese detective to be portrayed in Hollywood just in general, others were frustrated that a white actor was used to cast for the role. And it was actually reported that Orland would have a few drinks beforehand to make his speech more halting and to put a grin on his face just in order to play this role, which is pretty extreme when you think about it.
Another real world example that I don't think anyone would really think of would be Avatar: The Last Airbender, when it was heavily influenced by the East Asian culture and was actually inspired by a fair bit of Japanese anime, but mostly from the anime that it originated from, which was Avatar: The Last Airbender. But a majority of the actors in cast were just white actors, and this seems a bit weird for a movie that is supposed to be built on the East Asian culture. And but the only real Asian in a main role was Prince Zuko, who was played by Dave Patel, the only person in that could even closely resemble or an Asian out of everyone else. Who else was the general? Uh, and he ended up uh, and he's actually not an Asian or an American. He's really, well, he is an American, but he is more of an Indian descent, and it kind of puts the movie itself in a little bit of a bad light when the only main actor that's Asian is ends up being the bad guy.
Mm. Then just another real world example comes from Breakfast at Tiffany's, and this is with Mickey Rooney, played as Mr. Unioshi. And so when he was cast in this role, Rooney played the role with taped eyelids, buck teeth, sibilant accent, and all. And so you can see that picture right there. But even Paramount recognized just the toxic caricature that occurred, and just they actually created a documentary called Mr. Unioshi, an Asian Perspective. So that was kind of to shed light on this role once they realized how toxic it really was. And years after this was filmed, Rooney even claimed that if he had known the hurt and offense that the character brought, he would not have played the role. So that's pretty serious too, because you can see just some regret in that, and see the hurt and offense that came just from a character, just from him putting on taped eyelids and buck teeth and giving an accent that really wasn't necessary.
Now, bear with me on this one. There's not a lot on there, but there's a lot in context. Another real world example would have to be in the movie Doctor Strange, when the character the Ancient One, when he was originally depicted in the comics as an elderly Asian male. Now, before anyone says anything, there's a reason why I said he or she. It's because the Ancient One itself doesn't really have a gender. It was always described as just one above everyone else, and the and that's pretty much what they rolled with the MCU. Unfortunately, some of the words they used though were not particularly in line. For example, one of the deals they said was that they felt that a comic accurate version might come off as a racist stereotype. So they went with an androgynous looking female. And that ended up knocking them even more, because they made it a bit racist with the whitewashing, and they made it a bit sexist as well.
Mm. So now that you've seen examples, you know what it is, you've seen the history of whitewashing, what is ultimately the solution? What can we do now with that information? And so the first thing is, though media has the capability to shape stereotypes and influence perspectives, ultimately increased awareness of whitewashing and ultimately its harm can change those viewpoints. So rather than receiving what the media says and just automatically accepting, we can educate ourselves with Asian culture and do so from the Asian population itself. And so it's all about sources. It's all about looking into these things and getting actual perspective from the people of that culture, rather than just trusting what's in the media, what's on our television screens, and being consistent in doing that, because we all want to be understood. We all want to share the things that we love about our culture. But when Hollywood does it in a way that hurts us, it would be painful. And so that's something that we can do, is just to dig deeper rather than just accepting what is put in front of us. And so ultimately, learning together, it means listening together and being open to new concepts. So having an open mind frame when talking with people from this culture, and when just hearing about new things, having that open mind frame and being able to hear from someone else and hear about their past and their differences.
So these were some of the links that we ended up using that start off whitewashed out in the Asian American representation. And Asian American representation in media by Helen Yang. The second one would be the Hollywood's whitewashing habits, and then the third one would be the Wall Street Journal Mickey Rooney article.
So you can visit those links if you want more information. And just to wrap this up, this is our service learning project that we did through the Austin Peay State University Department of Communication and through the course Communication 4050, Values, Ethics, and Diversity in American Popular Culture. We're really glad that you tuned in, and we're really glad that you listened to this. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you are willing to dig a little deeper and find out more about how whitewashing has affected us. I know Trey and I had a good time working on this project, and so thanks for listening.
It was definitely a learning experience. It's because before I did like the project itself, I honestly thought that whitewashing was only for Asian Americans, and it didn't happen as much as I ended up finding out.
Right. So true. Well, thank you guys. We'll see you later.